Okay, so for more now, we bring in our political analyst, Brian Sobel. The Meuller Marathon today.
Yes.
Brian, what exactly did we learn?
Well, if you had read the Meuller report, you didn't learn a whole lot new. If you were new to the process, I think you learned one very important thing, and that is that the Russians were in our election with both hands and probably didn't care. They had a preference for Donald Trump, but probably didn't care too much about anything other than sowing problems within the democratic process. I think that was reiterated today in very, very stark terms.
Well, obviously, we saw Democrats go through and run down the list of potential acts that could have been obstruction of justice, but obviously did not lead to any charges for the sitting president. But with that being said, all of that being sort of laid bare on national TV today, was this damaging at all, you think, for President Trump?
Well, to the extent that people who don't know anything about what's going on watched it and become enraged by what they heard, maybe that's a call to action. But I think in talking with some people back east, they didn't hear a whole lot new.
But a lot of folks have not read that report at home. Now they hear it on TV.
If they watched.
Okay.
You know, and that was the whole point, was finding people who actually sat down and watched any part of 5 hours today. And if they did, they heard some new things, or things that they were not aware of, and should be troubling, to be honest with you.
Yeah, it seemed as though Republicans went into this with one strategy. They've primarily stuck to that strategy. Democrats sticking to their strategy, which is to build this collective narrative, this damning narrative against President Trump and his possible obstruction of justice in the investigation. Republicans, though, their whole strategy was, let's question the integrity of the report. Let's question Robert Meuller. Let's listen now to Texas Congressman Radcliffe, a Republican, for how he questioned Robert Meuller.
The special counsel made neither a prosecution decision or a declination decision. You made no decision. You told us this morning and in your report that you made no determination. So respectfully, Director, you didn't follow the special counsel regulations.
Okay. You didn't do your job.
Right. And for Republicans, I think they were hoping today to just get out of here without a wow moment by Democrats or a gotcha that laid bare some other issue. I think that happened. I think if people were watching the testimony today, I think they came away, I don't want to say they felt a little sorry for Bob Meuller, but he wasn't on his game.
Yeah, and a lot of people talked about that.
Yeah. And you know, a couple hundred times couldn't give specific sightings for why he was saying something. I don't know that that inspired confidence in the report.
And he had to walk back a couple of statements as well.
Yeah, he did. And so I don't know that his performance will be received very well. He's 75 on August 7th.
Yeah.
And, you know, that shouldn't play into it entirely, but he clearly looked like a guy who was fatigued.
All right, so on the other side of the aisle, obviously we talked about, you know, Democrats trying to drill down on this question of obstruction of justice. There was one exchange, a lawmaker asking Mr. Meuller, could you charge the president with a crime after he left office? And Mr. Meuller responded with a yes. Does this kind of testimony move the needle for Democrats in terms of the issue of impeachment?
Well, two things. One is that if you could make the case that we have to deal with this now as opposed to later, because as you recall during the testimony, they went on to talk about the amount of time that would pass in terms of statute of limitations if he were reelected, suggesting that perhaps his whole motive for reelection is to get beyond the statute of limitations. So these are legal questions that will continue to be debated.
Do you think more Democrats will get on board with that?
Well, we'll see. They're trying to figure out how many more people on the Democratic side of the aisle are willing to talk about impeachment at this point.
You mentioned Robert Meuller and his demeanor, but it was clear, to me at least, Brian, that Robert Meuller did not want to engage in this dramatization of this report. He was not going
reluctant witness.
Right.
Yeah.
He was not going to make the case for Democrats. He's saying, Democrats, if you want to make that case, now's your chance. Was that your takeaway as well?
Basically, although I think there were times when I watched Meuller step a little bit outside his report to continue to remind the American people that this is serious, that what the Russians did was serious, that potentially what went on behind the scenes is serious. That, I think, was the case that he was trying to make.
All right, well, one of our local representatives here in the Bay Area, Representative Eric Swalwell, a Democrat from the East Bay, also a part of the hearings today. Let's listen to one exchange that he had today with Mr. Meuller.
George Papadopoulos, the president's senior foreign policy advisor, lied to the FBI about his communications about Russia's possession of dirt on Hillary Clinton. Is that right?
Correct. Yes.
The president's campaign chairman, Paul Manafort, lied about meetings that he had with someone with ties to Russian intelligence. Is that correct?
That's true.
And your investigation was hampered by Trump campaign officials' use of encryption communications. Is that right?
We believe that to be the case.
And there were a lot of examples brought up of potentially how Mr. Trump or people in his orbit were trying to sort of undermine the investigation. I mean, I guess the question is whether this has more of an impact for the public seeing this on TV, seeing Mr. Mueller say these statements on TV.
Time will tell. I mean, the dust will settle over the next few days, and we'll see whether it moves the needle at all. But to Representative Swalwell, one of the things that I was encouraged by were, along with Swalwell and others, saying, what is the learning here? Yeah, we think Trump's a problem and the orbit's a problem, but what's the learning? And so Swalwell talked today about a bill that would require campaigns to divulge whether they have been in contact with foreign governments. I think that
taking some proactive steps.
Exactly. I think if we want to learn anything by what's going on here, then we need to learn that there are nation states that have it out for us. And it's not just Russia, it's China and North Korea and Iran, and we're going to see all of those countries in the mix in 2020.
Mueller, you know, he offered another dire warning today during his testimony.
Yeah, saying it was still ongoing and it's happening right now.
Still trying to do what they did.
What he said was something else that's very important for all of us to think about, that this kind of diabolical rhetoric and everything else and intrusion into the campaign, he hoped would not become the new normal. That was a quote. And we can hope for that because it's the other options are not good.
Right. Brian, always a pleasure. Thanks for coming on.
My pleasure.